So many doctoral students are challenged with the fact that they can't come up with a really good idea, or they're worried that they have limited access to data, or can't really focus on an empirical research project because they're not sure what they could do. So oftentimes they're looking to their advisor or somebody else, or they're reading the literature and trying to figure out what could I do from a research project. And oftentimes the mistake is to just look at articles that were written 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and say, okay, I'm going to build off this piece of research. I find that to be a counterproductive strategy. One of the ways in which I like to build my ideas is to, independent of the literature, just listen to, practice, see what's going on, and then come up with ideas of general ideas that would be interesting. They don't have to be very specific from a research perspective, but just general ideas. So for example, I could come up with this idea that when a buyer and a seller are engaging with one another, what is the pattern of discussion between that buyer and seller that optimizes the likelihood that buyer will purchase from that seller if I was to have a recording of those two discussing that with each other? Or just general ideas like how could a key account manager optimally spend their time with different customers to be able to execute their territory, to be able to manage it and make them the most efficient possible. So they're just general ideas that I might come up with that I saw. And then from that, I would then work with and think of what are some really counterintuitive, really interesting things that I could come up with within that area that would be exciting. And when I start to think of these things, one of the things oftentimes that people are limited with is they say, well, how would I get data for that? How would I get data for this? And maybe if I had the data set here for this. And what I like to do, and this is particularly what I like to do with my doctoral students, is get to a whiteboard, and on that whiteboard, in an unconstrained manner, and this is, I think, what's critical on this, in a completely unconstrained manner, be able to go and say, if I were to have access to infinite data, infinite information, anything that's out there, how would I study this subject optimally and be able to gain the perfect information for this to be able to execute the study that I'd like to for my research? So that could include data from anything that could measure exactly what I want perfectly. And then from that, we just start brainstorming. Would that be the actual videos of people talking? Would it be audio recordings? Would it be transcripts of that? Would it be actually people surveys with people? Like what would be the optimal way to measure different things? And so as I start to get that information, and I ask things about, would it be over time? How frequently would I need that information? How would I? And I'm asking that, and I want to really say, ideally, if I had the ideal perfect situation, how would I do this? By doing this in an unconstrained manner, it allows me to elicit even more interesting ideas about the research. And then afterwards, after I come up with all these ideas where I completely take all the limitations and constraints away and whiteboard them, I start to think, well, what is possible then? After the ideas have been shaped, what is possible and what are the real limitations and how could I pursue this? And what I often find myself doing then is going after and pursuing things in a more ambitious manner and thinking in a broader, more interesting way about problems. And this, I think, is the mistake that many scholars and many junior faculty and doctoral students have, which is to think, here's some data that I think I could get. What research project should I do off of that? And they constrain themselves. They constrain their methods they're using. So the problem is we have to think as broadly from a methodological perspective, from an empirical perspective, from a data access perspective as possible, and brainstorm off that to come up with the most creative ideas we can for our research.